One of the biggest moves of the 2025 NFL Draft was the Detroit Lions trading up 32 spots from pick 102 to pick 70 to go up and select Isaac Teslaa, receiver out of Arkansas. So let's get right into it. So today we're back with our breakdown series, man. I'm fired up for this one, and I knew exactly who I wanted to start off with, and it's Isaac Teslaa, the receiver out of Arkansas, transfer from Hillsdale College, which is in Michigan. Grew up in Michigan, played the wing T offense in high school, but was the quarterback, which meant that he ran the ball pretty much all the time. He said there was no receivers on the field within that offense. So he was very under recruited, I guess you could say, but it makes some sense. Three schools, he said, were kind of after him. Starts at Hillsdale, kind of a slow start there. Year one has a receiver in front of him, so he's kind of in the back learning. You have the COVID season as well, which also leads to him kind of just practicing with his dad, who is also a receiver coach, so it works out incredibly well. And then the next season, he kind of takes over as the guy, almost 700 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns. And then the final season with Hillsdale, he absolutely took off. He had over 1,300 yards receiving, 13 touchdowns that season as well, on almost 20 yards per reception. That's when he transfers to Arkansas. And over the past few seasons, while his production hasn't been mind-boggling by any means, about 400 yards the first year, closer to 600 this past season, we got to see the talent against some of the best players in college, of course, in the SEC. And as the year went on this past year, we saw him really take over the role of being kind of the guy that would play inside and outside against Louisiana Tech. And that followed through the remainder of the season, with also tons of special teams sprinkled in, playing on both sides of the punt team, punt coverage, and punt return. Used all over the place on special teams, and also one of the most vicious receiving blockers that you'll find. The Lions ended up trading both of their third-round picks this upcoming season, one of those being the comp pick from the Aaron Glenn trade, in exchange to move up 32 spots from pick number 102. They also got back a 6th round this year and a 6th round next season, but this is the guy that I wanted to start things off with. One, he's a Lions fan, so wearing the Lions jersey, as Brad Holmes said, it actually made some sense. Felt weird at first, but he's like, oh, he actually is a Lions fan, which makes a ton of sense. But there's also the aspect of this was such a big move and such a big swing that I want to know what Brad Holmes loved about this. And I got to be honest, some guys, maybe you have to kind of really try to dig deep and see if you can figure it out. This one wasn't hard to figure out. This one was very obvious. Brad Holmes told us right away that it was the Senior Bowl, seeing him block. That was the first time he saw him in person. He's like, look, who's this guy blocking? And immediately I hear that, I'm thinking, okay, Senior Bowl, kind of trying to put on a show. Every game during the season for Arkansas, he was that guy as a blocker. And then also, again, special teams impact, which the Lions value from pretty much everybody that they draft, kind of the toughness aspect that comes along with that to find their way on the field. 6'4", 215-pound receiver, that 23 years old now, that tested like an absolute freak, which makes sense as well. He set school records in track. 4.4 340, 1.51 10-yard split is disgusting. Almost a 40-inch vertical, a 6.85 3-cone drill, 17 bench press reps. That, again, was kind of the receiver number 3 for Arkansas this past year, but it was really the Louisiana Tech game towards the end of the season where he became a consistent starter, consistently on the field for Arkansas, played inside and outside, rolled through the end of the season with the Texas Tech in the Liberty Bowl, where he ended up doing kind of the handstand that Amon-Ra St. Brown did. Unfortunately, that was actually not called a touchdown. It was actually called back. He was kind of fired up about that, but he did do the little Amon-Ra St. Brown celebration, which makes even more sense considering that he's a Lions fan. Dive into it all, but let's start with special teams first, because this is what the Lions, of course, are excited about, and they have a reason to be excited. First off, when you talk about punt return, both utilized inline and as a jammer, where he seemingly was effective in both when he was lined up between or on the line of scrimmage. That's where I found a lot of success. His physicality, his toughness, his makeup speed was overwhelming for some of those interior pieces, so he could typically latch with those guys, stick with them, run them out of the play, find some sustainability. When working as the jammer, you saw some inconsistency at being able to stick with guys early. You'd kind of lose early in those spots, but the makeup speed is what kind of played into it. The toughness also got showcased here. The makeup speed to get back into the play, find some connection. Flip side of things, on punt team, he was also used as a gunner. Things are pretty exciting because, again, the long speed showcases here, but he also has the hands where, hey, if it's inside the 20, he can down the ball pretty well with his hands, kind of tracking the ball down the field as well. So from a gunner perspective, there's more than just being, all right, he's fast and he can get down there and he can kind of avoid guys. You think about the release package, even though there's some inconsistency there, you like the build for that and some of the physicality that he can work downhill with, but it's also just the hand usage that he has when the ball gets towards the end zone. So both of those things to me tie in pretty well. Also think about some of the potential trick play upside, which, you know, the Lions do when you have Jack Fox throwing the football, that maybe you can get some opportunities to just throw it to Isaac Teslaa. I don't know if you'll get those chances, but if you could, I think it'd be great. So he was used on both punt teams. He was also used on the kickoff team as well, specifically for kickoff coverage. We got to see him lined out there. We'll see if that actually translates to the NFL because I think he needs more consistency early. But the toughness and the play speed, those things are definitely going to translate. Now, let's get to him as a receiver specifically. And trust me, we're definitely going to talk about the blocking aspect. You know what? Let's just get it started there. He's a great blocker. Great blocker. There's little knocks that you have. Sometimes I felt his entry was a little bit inconsistent. The way he kind of settled in the pin blocks, he'd be a little bit over aggressive and kind of get over himself, and then he wouldn't even gain any sort of contact. So he could do things like that. But he was incredibly powerful. There was a really jolting hand placement that he would constantly work to reset his hands, find an entry inside, absolutely just go light up safeties. Like that was his thing. He wanted to get up to safeties, crack block, just take guys out of the play. But then he would settle in, take on linebackers, and really work to kind of hold an edge there. There was a great effort to his game that was super noticeable as a run blocker specifically. He would work late to the reps. He would kind of just look for work. If a play broke down, he kind of just find somebody to block. And if he got a good sustain or a good latch, I mean, he would block the defender through the play, through the rep, and he was taking guys out of bounds with him. He's got a great build for this. 17 bench press reps kind of ties into that. The big hands as well to kind of latch guys. But at the same time, the mentality that he played with as a blocker, latch and sustain could be a little bit more inconsistent. Effort, the nastiness, you can utilize him as a screen blocker and find a ton of success with his size where he can just kind of seal and wall the cornerbacks off and allow things to spring up to the second level. He's a great blocker. There's so many clips you could showcase here of just success as a blocker and the toughness that you're looking for. We know lines value that as well. And you think about the explosive runs that you can create, his ability to go find guys and stay with that effort and kind of work to angle himself to create running lanes down the field. That led to explosive plays that we got to see as a run blocker specifically at the second and third levels. Now let's get to him as a receiver specifically here. And let's start off with the hands because of course that's where everything starts here. And he, to me, has very good hands to great hands. Statistically speaking, you'd say it's fantastic. The guy, according to PFF, had no drops over the past 2 seasons. Now, there were a couple passes that he didn't come down with. One, the sun was in his eyes, kind of flew out of bounds. But for the most part, he didn't really have any legitimate drops. Maybe a couple pass breakups you could throw in there, but no legitimate drops. I do agree with those numbers. See, the hands catcher that Brad Holmes was talking about, he constantly goes out and gets the football. He's fantastic in contested situations. Not only did numbers represent that, but you see the toughness in traffic. There's a nice little feel as well when he's in traffic to who's around him. He needs to tuck the football, kind of getting a sense to kind of work away from traffic, bracing himself for contact immediately. He doesn't really have a lot of like the easy production, which is to stand there and catch a quick route or stand there and catch 17 bubble screens this season. He didn't really have that production. So while he wasn't overly productive in terms of receptions and yards, he didn't get those receptions either within his game. Everything felt relatively downfield. I mean, you'd have some hitches and things like that, but typically there was some early contact that would come along with that as well. I loved the tracking ability. I thought the tracking adjustments were very noticeable. The way that he could work over his shoulder, speed up, slow down, adapt his angles on the move. The high point timing was really good. And again, he fought his way back to the ball, would catch things out in front of him when he was working in traffic. So you felt really comfortable kind of throwing it between two defenders that at very least he's probably going to knock the football down. At times I would like to see him stay on his feet when he's working back to the ball rather than kind of just like launching himself back and throwing his arms forward, because I thought it kind of minimized some of his real opportunity to make a play and it kind of minimized some of his play strength at the catch point. But those easy adjustments, the lengthiness makes him a massive target for a quarterback. And then from the hand usage, I thought there was a little bit of inconsistency within the technique. I think you saw that a little bit with the underhand technique. Sometimes the catch to tuck process didn't feel as fluid or maybe as fast as you would like to see. It didn't feel as natural all the time from catch to tuck. It felt a little bit like it would stay in his hands a little bit too long. Runs through the ground. He stays on the ground. He runs through his feet as he's making grabs. He'll catch things from behind without really having to flip his shoulders back to the ball. He can continue on his path and just kind of reach back, be confident with his hands. Awkward a little bit as a body catcher that didn't always feel the most natural, right? So the ball would kind of get on him a little bit, didn't always feel as consistent there. And he has fantastic hands. You're going to trust him. And then you get to the sideline feel. It's not only just a feel for where the sideline is, the awareness of where it is, but it's also the body control that gets shown off here as well. The two-footed toe drag. There was a great one against Missouri this past season on an over route. He has a fantastic feel for working the sideline. It's a couple occasions where he only got 1 foot in bounds, but for the most part, he knew where the sideline was. And you could see his pace change when he got to those spots. You could see the way that on broken plays, he was a huge playmaker. Like, obviously, that's not something you think of for the Lions offense, but Tim Patrick brought this element to a high level. Things broke down, found space. Teslaa was immediate to it as well. It wasn't like you had to wait for him to kind of, oh, the quarterback pointed, now I should move. It was immediate. Okay, it's not here, I'm moving. He'd flow with the quarterback. He'd break himself open late underneath. He had the physicality to kind of just box guys out, feel the sideline, big hands, make himself a massive target. And then also on some of his vertical routes, if it wasn't there, if it was a clear out, he would immediately transition to getting upfield. Let me see if I could separate. We, of course, saw it against Texas A&M right away on the 75 75-yard touchdown. But that's kind of just a natural feel that he has to his game. I think he could maybe improve a little bit with how he's hit zone windows to really settle himself in as a target. But for the most part, the hands are very good to great as a pass catcher right now. Now, when it comes to the separation ability, this is one of the spots that are a little bit more weird for me. I ended up giving him a good grade in this spot. The problem with Isaac Teslaa is there's a lot of things that I like positionally. However, one of my lower grades is the play speed. I think it's closer to average. It's average to slightly above average. He obviously can go, and you get him on the run. He has an acceleration buildup that's incredible. I loved watching Teslaa on over routes, and you'll see right here as the cornerback begins to dive on top, he has that inside stab and then the ready hands to push himself off, and then of course that acceleration to just take off in a straight line. And you see this on kind of like over routes, the way that he can separate. Then you also see it on just level 3 routes where he can just stack guys and roll over top. The problem is I didn't think he always played that fast, specifically underneath, and specifically the way he would kind of let trailing defenders stick with him a little bit too often, maybe by some of the angles that he would take. So that being said, it kind of pulls back, I think, a little bit of a separation as well. But there's a lot of things to like here. First off, he does carry some real knee bend. He can really snap off routes, seek at the top of the route, and this is where you get to see some of the body control that he can work with, the way that he really ties his footwork so that he can sink properly at the top of routes. Now, for me, the ankle bend didn't seem fantastic, and this is where you would start to see routes fade too often. One of the biggest knocks that I have, like the outbreakers, they would just fade, right? These things broke loose 1 or 2 yards, and you see him kind of drift back a little bit too often. I thought some of that was a little bit of the ankle bend specifically, where it didn't always feel as loose. It felt a little bit more tight, and that would cause him to bend a little bit. You would also not get incredible speed consistently out of those routes. So you think about a speed out route, you may drop some speed there. It's going to be a little bit more segmented than fluid as he's kind of working through those routes, and you're going to drop a little bit of speed specifically. When you think about body control, you think about looseness. This is where I love the shoulder dips, right? This is important off the release as well to kind of sink under traffic, sink under the jabs. This is something that they teach receivers, but it also shows up through the stem of his route. You'll see his ability to kind of sink, get under pads. He also has a pretty proactive awareness of it when he's working a field, working through the stem, the ability to kind of adapt the stem of a route, maybe give a little stick, step back inside, find leverage, dip under contact. Really nice feel for that. It really helped him work over the middle of the field as a big slot receiver to avoid constant contact. Now, if guys get on him off the line, that can be a little bit of a problem, but if he had a free release, he would do a pretty nice job of avoiding it. Right now, I thought we'll get to release a little bit later, but I thought occasionally he didn't always have the best awareness for expecting guys to drop out, and he kind of just run into traffic. But if he clearly saw it, he'd work around it pretty well, and he had the movement skills to do that. The level 1 pace I just thought wasn't great. The play speed level 1, it wasn't as shifty or as sudden. It didn't feel that urgent underneath, which was a problem a little bit for creating a ton of separation. Clearly, like if you watched him and Tez Johnson, you're getting different results. Some of that's just due to build. I did like the way that he would kind of stride out of his cuts, and I think when you did more cuts rather than true sinks and kind of break back to the ball, the way that he would kind of cut his routes, level 3, maybe it was a post route, kind of an over route, the way that he would stride out of those breaks that allowed him to create some real separation specifically. He's got a nice little burst when he's working some of those lateral cuts, though. If you're asking him to run like an in breaker, he can create some real burst laterally. He has that ability to drop his weight, control his speed at the top of the route. That way he was controlled. There was occasions where you'd feel like he'd get a little bit over himself and his weight would shift forward, and that's when he would try to plant and drop, and he felt kind of the ankle lack of some of the bend there, and it would kind of make it sluggish, and he would kind of fall over, and his weight would shift forward, and didn't get crisp. It lacked some of the crispiness that you're looking for. So for him, if he had to kind of speed up that process and work through it, it felt a little more sluggish. But if he could control himself, defender sitting on top, if I can match my pace of the route, understanding what I want to get to, that's when you felt more of that maybe burst working out, and there's a little bit more fluidity when he kind of worked out of his breaks. I think he could have done a better job with some of the route savvy and kind of playing off of how defender was sitting their leverage, right, playing through the contact, really setting them up a little bit better. Guys would get in trail, and it didn't seem like he had a great feel for how to maintain that separation, and guys would constantly kind of feel like they were undercutting his routes. So as you'll see, when he has better control of his pace, the footwork at the top becomes much more efficient. 1, 2, and then break. Now you can see it pops a little bit upright, but the footwork becomes much more efficient, and you can see some of the dip throughout the early stem when they were in that positive position. So you think about a 2-man coverage, that can lead to some real inconsistency there for me, at least early, as he kind of tries to develop how to shake those routes a little bit better. But what you do like as he's working through the stem of his route, there's kind of a jolting agility to his game where he can kind of just step over routes, cross face of routes. He can really change directions with some real juice. And that's, again, how he can kind of adjust the leverage on the fly specifically, which stands out. You see that within his hips, some of the looseness to kind of open his hips. Problem I have is I think he can be a little bit slower when he's kind of pressing coverage. The stride strides that he'll play with, right? They'll get minimized, but then there's also just not some of the juice to really press coverage and attack it and make guys open up. So the problem is guys can kind of sit on off coverage and kind of sit on the top of his routes. You'll see this on curls. You see this on hitches. He doesn't get guys to bail very often, and they can typically be pretty balanced to play and drive out of those spots. Now, here's where the savvy does come into play. He has a pretty instinctual feel, like if he's working an option route or if he's working like an in-breaker or an outbreaker, something like small underneath, you'll get the kind of a feel of like, okay, the defender is going to settle on this, and he'll throw in a little bit of extra footwork, right? He'll throw in a little bit more where it kind of throws off the timing. It's a little bit unorthodox for a defensive back where it's not always the same looking, and it'll give you a little bit of extra kind of just creativity at the top of the route to try to get a defender to just be a little bit off balance. That way he could at least get in front of the defender, cross his face, and end up creating leverage. He kind of had a Sam Laporta feel from in that sense where he constantly just played with an edge, right? He would get an edge, kind of get on your shoulder, and then that's how he would separate a lot, especially underneath. That had a Sam Laporta vibe to it. Kind of looks like he's fast walking at times because of the short strides that he makes, but the agility is much better here in the control because he constantly is running up on his toes. So it controls his routes better. It's kind of fluid. He can transition pretty well, kind of bump his routes, shake his leverage. The problem is it just kind of looks like he's fast walking sometimes because of the way that he runs up on his toes. A little bit upright as a route runner as well. I think there's a slight rise to his game we'll talk about as a route runner, but he's just a little bit more upright within his stance for a lot of the route, which I think can allow him to be a little bit more like, okay, we can get contact on this guy, especially off the release. But to me, I think he's got good ability to separate at the next level. You're going to have to run routes that make sense. His route tree wasn't the most diverse at Arkansas. You had some wheel routes. You had a lot of combo routes. You had kind of the wheel comeback that he would snap into. You had some slants that were a little bit inconsistent. They felt like he would stick those routes and they could fade a little bit. You had some in breakers. Obviously, you had a lot of vertical routes. You would kind of press the seam, work there. You had a little bit of whip routes underneath. So there was some diversity, but you could open it up a little bit more. Specifically, you didn't see a lot of speed routes ran for him specifically. So I think that might, speak to a little bit of the separation upside there specifically to the run after catch. And this is where I honestly think he was more below average when I watched him. I do like the physicality. He was tough to bring down. He put his shoulder down. He'd run over somebody. I did see a really bad fumble that kind of flew through the end zone. But outside of that, I just didn't feel a lot of creativity. Didn't feel like a lot of elusiveness as a runner. Didn't feel like there was a lot of setup. He was kind of just get straight, get north and south, which I don't have a problem with. The transition was fine here as well. Quickly kind of recognized where traffic was around him. And the catch to tuck was a pretty smooth transition. It wasn't the most dynamic, but it was pretty smooth there. He also, again, didn't have a lot of opportunities to just work, catch, and run opportunity. Just thought it was closer to below average. And I think the background, the wing T offense, playing quarterback, basically being a running back for that kind of system, the toughness that he has. I mean, you could probably give him the ball a ton and he's going to be pretty comfortable. He's going to have the durability to constantly have the ball in his hands. Like, I don't doubt that at all. It's just for me, I just didn't feel a lot of like creativity or shake within his game once the ball got in his hands. There's definitely some long speed where he can take off, but even the angles that he took weren't that creative to kind of open up like, okay, he's going to take this thing to the house. So I thought that was closer to below average, but that could be a lot better with just more opportunities, maybe a better feel. But right now, I didn't think it stood out. Now, in terms of the release package, this is where I'm a little bit like, okay, understandable, slightly below average right now for me. And even Brad Holmes talked about like he's going to have to work on the release as most receivers have to. That's definitely the case with Isaac Teslaa. Some of that is he's constantly lining in the slot, so it's a little bit different release package. He constantly has the two-way go. If he's lined out wide, like he talked about at Hillsdale, he came in, there was an X receiver there, and then he kind of had to work into that role. If he's lined out with a little bit less room to actually work, we're going to need more consistency to actually open up and pry leverage because right now too many guys are just jamming him and getting hands on him. When he's in the slot, I thought it kind of mitigated some of that problem, but it's going to show up more the wider that he is. That being said, though, you can find creative ways to help him get off the line early. There's some good here. There's some real good. I think it's just more potential driven right now off the line of scrimmage. One thing is I don't think his steps are always that decisive. His single step, they just don't feel that decisive. There's some short area quickness. They just don't feel overly decisive. They don't create a lot of lateral depth. He doesn't always feel like he's actually going anywhere. He's kind of just sitting in the same spot, which gives him some problems off the release. That lateral movement, again, it just doesn't create a lot of depth. Like his way that he'll attack leverage immediately off the ball from the slot. You'll see this if guys are off coverage, if they're in press, the way he immediately attacks leverage, the way that he kind of works into his terms through that leverage that we can kind of cross face, get in front of guys, create, again, kind of that half-man opportunity where he's just able to get upfield. He plays with fantastic timing off the line. There's a really good burst if it's a clean release. He gets off the line immediately. It's sudden. It can allow him to get upfield and stack really quickly, so you get that kind of feel to it as well, just that burst to get off the line. That short area movement is noticeable. It opens up some upside. It can kind of shrink his release package, which can allow him to speed things up. I think he needed a little bit of better instinctual feel at times. Again, when he's working in the middle of the field, kind of feel guys around him, be a little bit more expectation heavy there. Just kind of felt like he wasn't expecting guys and things would catch him off guard. Felt his hands would drop a little bit off the release. Those weren't as always consistent. Through the route cuts, I felt like he used his hands well, kind of would use that inside shoulder, break guys off. But off the release, they felt like they would drop too much off the line of scrimmage, which they didn't feel like they were in sync incredibly well with his footwork to actually tie those two things together to find consistent success. And he also, to me, didn't adjust his routes always to the pick routes and the combinations. Like you could see that he could change his pace, but sometimes it didn't feel like he always had a sense of where the other receiver was, and he would kind of bump into routes or he'd be a little bit on top of routes and it would throw things off a little bit. I just didn't think he had great juice off the line. The skip step wasn't super dynamic. Again, would kind of work in place, but the short area footwork was noticeable and that allowed some upside there. A release like this showed his upside. He almost really sells the fade, opens the slant here. You get the quick skip in here that then resettles itself back down and then breaks back inside. He shows the upside. He definitely has the play strength to work through contact, continue to push upfield. Even when his releases were ugly and guys would get on top of him, he would still constantly work upfield. And then he showcased some agility through the route to kind of eventually work himself open. So the release needs a lot of work, no doubt here, but there's definitely a package you can work into. I don't think he'll ever be the most diverse or release package type of receiver, but the physicality, the juice off the line, the toughness here, those kind of things, it's going to open more upside than what it is right now. As a route runner, I think he's a good route runner. And this is the thing that I kind of buy into the most, right? If you think it's kind of just a complete developmental prospect and you're just buying in traits here, like I don't completely believe that, because I think his route running, the experience that he has says differently. Like his dad was a receiver coach. He worked with his dad. And I think you can see a lot of the discipline, the integrity that he runs with as a route runner, which to me kind of is a little bit different than what you would expect if you're just thinking that's the idea of him. I think he's a good route runner. I think that he does a nice job of kind of opening up a linebacker's hips, pressing that leverage early, finding a way to open up their hips so he can snap off the route, right? Really making sure he has a feel of, okay, that guy open, now I can snap off my route. I feel like he had really good discipline as a route runner. And I think it really showcased on level 3 routes where he would attack safeties, constantly getting safeties to declare their hips on those routes because he was so much integrity that he would push those routes with. He could get guys to flip, then he could work over top, and then he would eventually just accelerate. So you feel the level 3 acceleration and level 3 ability to get over top, constantly stack guys over top, even if the ball wasn't getting out there. But it showed up in a lot of different ways with some of the discipline that he played with. There was a really nice pace that allowed him to kind of bend off routes, create comeback routes. He understood what he was getting into, so he would adapt his pace. That way he could really sink, minimize his footwork, get back to the football. There was some bend that he could play with. He really worked to kind of snap his routes off, which led to some consistency there as well. Because of that eye discipline, he could really kind of keep defensive backs in their spot, didn't allow guys to constantly jump his routes, kept defensive backs at bay a little bit. Now, again, if they're sitting off coverage, they could kind of settle in on top. But for the most part, like guys weren't jumping his routes because he was very disciplined with his eyes when he was working underneath. Kind of had a feel to working for first downs, right? Getting himself in the right position. Okay, let me bend this route out a little bit. That way I can get to where I need to go. Catch, let me get to the marker. So he had a really nice kind of football intelligence feel to his game as well, which would pop. His pace, to me, would slow down when he had to sink, which is why the entire pace of the route would slow down, which would allow him to sink better. The problem is, again, though, that doesn't always vertically push guys out of the play. So it really relied on the integrity that he would showcase just in his body movement. Find a way to kind of snap his routes with a little bit more pace. I think it could open better windows for the quarterback specifically instead of kind of closing his windows off a little bit too much. But he had a nice little change of pace that he would work to. It was very subtle, but he had a subtle change of pace that he would work to through the route speed that he would work, which would allow him to kind of work through his stem with more success. And then again, he would stride through his level 3 cuts. Didn't like how underneath it felt like there was some real false movement that would come into play where he was trying to create separation. Because it was less sudden, he would create a lot of false movement where his footwork was kind of doing nothing. He was just kind of beating the drum underneath. Even though he could bend, he was just kind of beating the drum underneath to try to create some openings. I didn't think, again, he really did a great job of always maintaining the stack, specifically over the middle of the field. Guys would kind of stick with him in trail positions. There didn't feel as much kind of savviness there. But to me, he's a good route runner. There was just some false footwork that would show up, especially the more he was working a little bit underneath. And then you get to some of the route savvy, and this is what surprised me. I think he had good route savvy to his game as well. I point out one of the knocks here, but there's a lot of good things. He keep his eyes on zone defenders, which really kind of helps keep those guys positioned, didn't allow guys to kind of break on his routes. He would really quickly react again, like I touched on, to broken plays, get himself open. He would really sell routes with his upper body. He kind of keep his eyes and his hips together. Those things would be connected to create some savviness. It would create some shake through his cuts as well as a route runner on some more of the vertical plane. The agility would really show up on some of of his vertical routes as well, which was pretty impressive. So to me, I thought he had good route savvy as well. Of course, he was a great contested pass catcher, the route strength, the ability to go get the football. He was great in those spots. His playmaking ability showed up with kind of his feel, his ability to kind of break things open a little bit late, kind of have a good sense of that. And he would also create plays just from being a blocker as well. He could track the ball at a really high level. His body control was a plus to me as well. Very clutch. I mean, this was the kind of guy you wanted to go to with the game on the line, and he would just kind of find a way to come down with the football, find a way to do something spectacular late. Like, he was a very clutch playmaker, good situationally as well. His blocking was fantastic, and he's a super tough player. So a lot of the positional things I think he did at a plus level for the most part. A couple little knocks here, right? Things that are going to need improvement at the next level. He could take a year for you to kind of dial in a lot of the stuff. That's kind of my early sense. Critically speaking, though, I think that you could buy into him being better after the catch than what I saw. It could just be opportunities there, but his background says he's going to be better after catch than what my grade was. But his hands, he can create separation. He's just so physically tough, and then at the same time, he's a better route runner than you would expect, which makes sense to where he was drafted. But he's going to come down with the football. He kind of had like a Jack Besh feel to that, but the guy just doesn't drop passes. So I mean, he makes a lot of sense, and he just has a feel for the game. It's just naturally reactive to the ball, adjusting his hands, just has a good feel, but he has an aggressive feel that just attacks things. He's the kind of receiver that you're going to want to have on your team. Some things could be a little bit closer to a year away within his game, but he's going to immediately obviously bring special teams impact, but the upside is clearly there, and he's just a really fun receiver to watch. So for me, Isaac Teslaa, like early on, you kind of, to me, I thought that his just wiggle, his ability to play from the slot at his size with this crazy athleticism, I thought that was immediately my takeaway is like, oh, okay, that makes sense why you would like a guy a lot like this. But the toughness aspect, the ability to create explosives, a lot of things I feel like they haven't been tapped into yet, while at the same time understanding there's development that's going to be needed here, but you could play him anywhere because of some of the feel that he has for the game. He clearly shows a love for the game week in and week out. Feels like you get the same guy, which is great. And also did feel like things were getting better as you watched him throughout the season. He kind of just took over that role, like I said, against Louisiana Tech, and that's what he's really done all over the place. He just found a way to get on the field, and I think that's what Isaac Teslaa is going to do for the Lions here. But this is definitely a developmental pick, but in time, there's going to be a lot of things that you like. But ultimately, I just wanted to play a little bit faster, but he is a much better route runner, much better detail, much better savvy than you would expect. So don't think of this as just like, oh, it's traits and that's it, because that's not him. He definitely has a feel for the game, and the production was more so just getting on the field than anything. Some of it was their offense passing the football, but it was just getting himself on the field. And he took over that role, and I don't think that there was any doubt, any questions about like, oh, should we make sure that he's the guy? He earned being the guy, and I think that he kept it up as he went forward. So Isaac Teslaa, to me, grades are on the screen. Really excited about this draft pick, man. The more I watched, the more I understood it. And I'm really pumped up because I think this guy is going to stick around for a long time. He feels like a Lion within this receiving group, but it's nothing that you want to put too much pressure on him right away. Just once he gets on the field, he's going to showcase this guy belongs. It's just working his way on the field is going to be the challenge early. So that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.